There are things you don't want an AI system to say for safety reasons, not for bias reasons. For instance, if you don't want to be able to ask a question, how can I create a bomb to eradicate the human race, and have it say, here, happy to give you the recipe, right? Maybe not the best thing from a safety perspective. So the similar techniques you use for bias, I think you also need an organization using the best tools, the best practices to try to also protect against safety issues. Literally algorithms plus data, and the algorithms are relatively well known. So data is the lifeblood of any AI system, and having the ability to organize and manage that data is essential for any organization trying to build AI systems. And with the explosion of AI over the last 15 years, but really over the last 6 months, this is going to become more and more an important and essential capability within every organization. I've been building AI systems over 30 years, so it's changed a little bit over the time. Clearly, the first issue is just storage and management and processing of the data, right? The data now is so large. Back in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't quite as essential. It was smaller data sets. But today, the data sets are huge. So you need a system that can store it efficiently in a distributed way. And we've used various systems over the years to do that. And you need a system that can process this huge amount of data in parallel at scale. One of the key areas in data management for me is data quality. So it's, even if you work with data companies, and when we were a startup, and then even at Apple, for instance, many of the data sources come from other places, other vendors. And surprisingly, the data is not always in perfect, clean form. So you need to have a process and tools and a pipeline that goes through and takes that data, cleanses it, adapts it. And often, if you have multiple sources, you need to integrate data together. And that can be a real challenge. I mean, there are standard systems, ETL systems, et cetera, but sometimes you need proprietary algorithms. As an example, with Siri, when we were a startup, you would get millions and millions of restaurant name data and business name data. And if you had something, Joe's Restaurant, Joe's Bar and Grill, are they the same or not? Yeah. It was a real problem. But Joe's, and probably you'd say yes. But Joe's Pizzeria and Joe's Grill, maybe not, right? And so how do you know? So there's a lot of work that goes into cleansing, integrating data. And then the final thing I'll mention, which is a big topic, which is in data management, is privacy and security, right? Once you have data coming in from users, there are standards and issues and regulations. That means you need to be able to ensure that the data you have is accessible only by the right people, that is secured and protected, and keeps privacy as much as possible standardized. So at Apple, we had, there's a number of techniques and teams. There's a lot that goes into that. And so you need good systems, good processes, and set up your organization to be able to handle all of these challenges. Absolutely. So it is a challenge, right? Your first tendency is, well, we'll just record everything. But I think that's the wrong approach. You really need to be thoughtful about what is saved, especially if it involves personal information, and what is not saved. So step one for me is it's only an issue for privacy if it's stored somewhere make sure you're only storing things that you're actually going to use and actually need to provide value to your customer. So that for me is like step one, is really analyzing the data, what you have and why you need it. And that gets into a principle that I've used all the way through, which is transparency and control by the user.
Yep.
So we're storing data. It shouldn't just be some terms and conditions somewhere. They should know what is stored and why. And I'll give you a very simple example. With Siri, you could say, find restaurants near my house. Well, Siri would come back and say, where do you live? You would say, okay, I live here. And then it would say, do you want me to remember that?
Yeah.
And the user could have a decision. If I say yes, it'll be stored.
Yeah.
Some privacy risk, but there's also convenience. Now I can say, find movies near my house. And so being able to have that choice of what gets stored as much as possible, and then to give them the control that maybe they stored it, but they want to change their mind later. At every point when it's stored in a way that the user can see, transparent, and also control, say this is stored so that it'll be convenient for you to access this information and you don't have to enter it every time, right? So that trade-off of value versus of privacy, I always try to do that. Obviously, best practices around data storage and doing it in a secure way, having audits. We had a whole team at Apple, separate from the engineering and product teams, whose job was to almost, go in as hackers and validate every assumption, so that if Apple ever gets pulled into Congress or something, they can say, we are guaranteed sure this data has been secured in the way that it was said it would be done. So having the organizational aspect. So for me, those are the ideas. Get the data, just the data you need, make it transparent, and give user control as much as possible to show the value. Use best practices, both on kind of the system side, storage, et cetera, but also organizational side. Have audit teams and really kind of checking that things, compliance is being met and design is being met. Algorithms aren't biased. They're just kind of pattern matching, pattern seeking devices. And they're looking for patterns, and that's their goal. That's their job. They're looking for useful patterns in data. That's how machine learning works.
Yeah.
But the data that you give will have patterns, and some of them are going to be desirable, and it can be that some of them are not desirable, right? And society and morality and all of this goes into it. Machines don't know about any of that. They just will take the data you have. So when you are going through this process of data collection, the data that you're going to feed to an AI to try to discover hopefully useful patterns, there's a number of techniques you need to consider to, as best as possible, ensure that your data sufficiently represents the customer base you're trying to meet. Really, that's what it comes down to. And if you get a disfluency between those, if the data is not well representative, it's a problem. So you need to have, first of all, teams who are looking and working explicitly on bias. They know there's going to be some patterns in there. Is it well represented according to our morals, according to our values, according to what we want to be able to give to the customer, right? If you just take random data and throw it in, it's not enough. You need to have an active investigation, active tools by people to do that within your organization. And of course, diversity is often one of the areas that bias is an issue. So having a very diverse team, maybe a team trained and understanding what to look for. The other thing that, as best as possible, even if you have an organization trained to try to reduce any problems of data bias, you may not capture everything. So being able to allow and listen to and be responsive to end user feedback, if they raise an issue, to say, we hear you, we care, and we're doing something about it. that will get, ultimately a better solution. You have more eyeballs on it, more perspectives, et cetera. So, and the last thing that for me, when I deal with AI, there's, bias kind of issues. There's also safety issues, and the same topics, especially with these like large language models, there are things you don't want an AI system to say for safety reasons, not for bias reasons.
Yeah.
For instance, if you don't want to be able to ask a question, how can I create a bomb to eradicate the human race, and have it say, here, happy to give you the recipe, right? Maybe not the best thing from a safety perspective. So the similar techniques you use for bias, I think you also need an organization using the best tools, the best practices to try to also protect against safety issues. AI is a tool to help humanity solve big problems, achieve more with our lives.
Yeah.
AI does not have the ethics and morals and values that we do. So you need, people to teach a machine so that when it reflects back, we've given it to us, we don't get offended. I've been doing AI and machine learning in many forms and many techniques over time. The way we use LLMs is different than the way we use some of the models earlier on. But often, so when you're working with data and you're working with these algorithms, there are many things you can try to do to lift the performance and accuracy of the models that you're doing. So for instance, with LLMs specifically, they're usually based on a very large pre-trained model. Mm-hmm. It's kind of trained over all sorts of text and data on the web and elsewhere, books, and it knows a lot, and it's great. But think of that as background knowledge. Mm-hmm. Solve your problem for your customers or for your organization. A general model will get you so far, but being able to use transfer learning by fine-tuning the pre-trained model using data that is more adapted and more specific to your use cases will make it better, will improve the performance and accuracy. And in fact, many organizations out there, when they're thinking about how do I get value from AI, the first question I would ask is, do you have proprietary data? Do you have data that no one else has? Because if you do, you can use that to create an AI system that no one else can. Mm-hmm. And that will give you an incredible advantage in the industry. So that's kind of one of the areas. And that can come both from, fine-tuned data that you have, documents or files, but it can also come through what's known as human feedback in the loop, right? Just being able to grade for my use case, for my customer base, this is a better answer than that. That feedback can be fed back into the LLM machine learning model and incredibly improve performance, right? Some would say that, for example, the OpenAI models, ChatGPT models are more in advance than, say, Google Bard.
Yeah.
Google has an incredible amount of data, but they haven't yet done as much work on that tuning, human in the loop feedback, et cetera. So they're a little bit behind in that. So being able to adapt a model is extremely important, both using, data that you have, proprietary data, and human training data. Previously, before LLMs, we used many other techniques, such as data augmentation. So like at Siri, we'd get data of use cases, but we would augment the data by substituting in different synonyms and different phrases as a way of creating more data. And as you had mentioned earlier, typically more data, as long as it's clean and representative, can actually improve the model. We also use techniques such as ensemble learning, where you have multiple models working together to a problem. to solve a problem. And that often, when we were at Samsung, I sold a company to Samsung, we were doing a lot of AI work there. We used ensemble models as a way to lift the performance, et cetera. So those are some things that I would try when you're wrestling either with LLMs, wrestling with more standard machine learning models, as a way to kind of squeeze out the best accuracy and performance out of the AI.